Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unchained, your no-hype resource for all things crypto. I'm your host, Laura Shin. Before we begin, a couple notes. First, I'm doing another survey to find out what you want from the podcasts and how I can make them better. Last year, we heard you loud and clear on the news front, and so have begun including a weekly news recap at the end of every Unconfirmed. This year, what would you like to see from Unchained? Please take a moment to fill out the survey to let us know what you'd like from the show. The link is in the show notes, or you can just go to surveymonkey.com/r/unchained2020. Again, that's surveymonkey.com/r/unchained2020. And guess what? Crypto.com has offered our survey respondents a chance to win a metal MCO Visa card, and Crypto.com will stake these cards indefinitely. 10 lucky winners will enjoy card benefits, including free Spotify, free Netflix, and 3% back on all spending. And they'll earn extra interest on their crypto deposit and more. Thanks, Crypto.com. Again, take the survey now. surveymonkey.com/r/unchained2020. That's surveymonkey.com/r/unchained2020. One other thing, Unchained is hiring. I'm looking for a remote editorial assistant to start working later this summer, as one of my staff is leaving to go to grad school. This role handles numerous editorial tasks, from booking guests to proofreading to social media, and deals with everything from the show itself to the show notes to the newsletter. If you love crypto and have journalism experience, get in touch. I have a link to the job posting in the show notes, and the listing is also available on my website. There, it explains what you should send in and how. Today's episode is a panel from the Ready Layer 1 conference with Ilya Polasukin of Near Protocol, Zaki Manian of Cosmos, Robert Habermeyer of Polkadot, and Arthur Brightman of Tezos. We discuss how these Layer 1 chains plan to take on Ethereum, not just with features, but in terms of attracting developers and users. Plus, we get into a big discussion over whether or not Bitcoin and Ethereum are direct competitors. It was a lively, fun discussion, and I definitely noticed that the viewers thought so too from looking at their comments. Enjoy. The Stellar Network connects your business to the global financial infrastructure, whether you're looking to power a payment application or issue digital assets like stablecoins or digital dollars. Stellar is easy to learn and fast to implement. Start your journey today at unchained.stellar.org.
Kraken is the best exchange in the world for buying and selling digital assets. It has the tightest security, deep liquidity, and a great fee structure with no minimum or hidden fees. Whether you're looking for a simple fiat on-ramp or futures trading, Kraken is the place for you.
In response to the challenging times, Crypto.com is waiving the 3.5% credit card fee for all crypto purchases for the next 3 months. Download the Crypto.com app today. Welcome, everyone, to our panel, where we've got a number of founders of Layer 1 protocols, which I believe a year ago, maybe we were calling them Etherium Killers, but I don't know if that's the term nowadays. Anyway, why don't we just each have each of you just go around and say what it is that you're working on and where you're sheltering in place from.
Hi, I'm Zaki. I'm sheltering in place in Palo Alto, working on Cosmos. Just working on launching IBC right now.
Hi, my name's Rob. I work on Polkadot, which is a heterogeneous sharding platform. I'm hunkering down in the DMV, in the DC area.
Hey everyone, I'm Ilya, co-founder at Near, working on pretty much, we just released mainnet and stage 1, and then kind of going to decentralize it over this months and beyond. Actually in Shanghai, in China.
Hi, my name is Arthur Brightman. I'm a co-founder of Tezos. Chain has been live for a bit over almost 2 years now, and I'm sheltering in place in Singapore.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining. So I actually wanted then all of us to also just give everybody kind of an overview of what it is, like why we, brought you all together. So why don't you each now just say what it is that your protocol does and kind of where in the stage of development you're at.
Cool. I can go first. So Cosmos. Cosmos is a software stack for building your own blockchain. And so the Cosmos Hub and a number of other blockchains like the Binance Dex chain, IrisNet, Kava, Terra have all been live on this software stack for about a year. But sort of the two pieces of this sort of vision of Cosmos. One piece was this idea of, build your own blockchain. Everyone can have their own sort of customized, community-driven layer one. And then the second piece was interoperating those blockchains. So in the year since we launched, since a bunch of these networks started to launch, we've been working on this interoperability framework called IBC. And right now we're in the midst of Game of Zones, which is the sort of incentivized testnet, sort of inspired by Game of Stakes, which was sort of the original incentivized testnet, that we're sort of putting IBC through its paces, expecting to launch IBC on the Cosmos Hub later this summer.
Robert?
Yeah, so I view that there's a design space of blockchain scalability. So what Polkadot does is it occupies a space, a point in this design space that's in between something like homogeneous sharding, where you have a bunch of different shards that all execute the same kind of smart contracts and things, and in between something like Cosmos, where you have a bunch of different blockchains that all talk to each other. Each of those blockchains has to be fully sovereign. So there are trade-offs to both sides of that design space, so we try to occupy a middle ground where those shards are heterogeneous. We have a bunch of different shards. We split up the work between a bunch of different blockchains that draw security from the same source, but those blockchains are specialized to specific tasks. They don't have to bring their own balances. They don't have to bring their own validator sets, things like that. So as any engineer knows, the closer you can specialize to a specific task, the better your solution is going to be. More general solutions are less efficient. So that's our notion of parachain. So we also embody this notion of build your own blockchain, bring your own blockchain. We built a toolkit called Substrate, which is for building your own blockchains, writing what we call the runtime, the logic of your blockchain in WebAssembly, in Rust code, and everything else is sort of taken care of. We eat our own dog food in the sense that we've written Polkadot using Substrate as well. So we've launched the Kusama network, which is it's essentially Polkadot, but it isn't Polkadot. So it's a incentivized, real value-bearing network for sort of putting through our theses through the hoops. And we're working on deploying the initial implementations of parachains over the next few months.
Ilya, I know you also have some news.
Yeah, so as Rob mentioned, there's kind of a spectrum. So we're on the other side of spectrum from Cosmos, where we see the world as kind of developers might want specialized solutions, but in very rare cases. And instead, they kind of want speed and ability to go to market if they actually building a business faster. Hence, we think of Near as a developer platform, really targeting kind of people building applications and not needing to think how infrastructure underneath works, right? Kind of same mottos that like AWS been able to build a huge business around. At the same time, to actually be able to serve these developers, you do need a scalable platform. You do need to solve a lot of kind of technical challenges. So that's what kind of infrastructures that we're building with Near Protocol is a sharded protocol. It runs WebAssembly. It kind of provides all this tooling around it. And yeah, like yesterday, as we mentioned in one of the opening talks, we just kind of opened up our mainnet. It is a proof of authority right now, but the point is that it allows people to start building applications and actually getting initial users. And then throughout May and June, we're going to be decentralizing, bringing more validators on board, and over time kind of releasing it to the community.
Arthur?
I think if you think of these networks and platforms merely as technology, you're missing the forest for the trees. What these things are primarily is they are communities. They are, I would say the closest thing to them are polities. They are essentially political organization. And the backbone of that usually is a blockchain. It's a good way to do it. It's just one way. And what we're trying to do with Tezos is ensure that this you can preserve that community, you can preserve that network while being somewhat agnostic to the technology. And the way you can do that is by having technology which can evolve. So if you're looking purely as, obviously software and development are very important. You cannot go anywhere if you don't have good engineering, if you don't have good software. But I would say that it's not the end. It's not the end goal. These things are not operating systems. They are fundamentally political entities. And what Tezos does is essentially trying to really tackle on that idea directly by introducing means of control by the community of the platform and how it evolves. And so Tezos has been, it's been in a testnet for many years now. It was on a mainnet for almost 2 years, and it's already been through three protocol upgrades. There are proposals for a fourth one coming, and so you can't define it as a piece of technology itself because the technology can change. And so, anything we can discuss in terms of like sharding, in terms of like interoperability, all of these fundamentally are technologies, but they're not communities. And I think that's the focus specifically of Tezos.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit more about that because, I kind of made that joke at the beginning about the Etherium Killers, which is sort of like this just catch-all phrase that was used for a lot of protocols that are sort of working in the same area that all of you are. But I'm sure, even just like listening to each of you describe what you're working on, obviously there's a lot more nuance. And yet at the same time, we are in this reality where kind of like the most used blockchain in this space is Ethereum. So I was curious to know how you differentiate yourself from Ethereum, what problems you believe still need to be solved in this space and what you guys are working on. And anybody can start. I know we've been going in this little clockwise circle, but it can go in any direction.
I'm happy to start. One thing I was reading about Near, which I thought was completely on point, and I don't know how relevant it is today, but there was a statement saying like, look, we've been working on sharding and like having this like super high scalability, and then we realized, hey, there's no point in building, like it's like building this giant building in a desert, And so I would say by and large, it might seem if you're like really looking very, very closely at this, it's like, everyone's using Ethereum, but I would say no one is using Ethereum on a global scale. Like you have some applications, most of them are going to be around lending, and there's not there's not that much, and so you might be tempted to think like, oh well, these things have not been adopted, but I take the view, and it's not a very it's a view that's very popular in the Bitcoin circle, but I think that if you have too much of a platform and technology mindset, you might miss that. But I take the view that merely holding a token is using it. If you're thinking in terms of censorship resistance, seizure resistance, store of values, which are fundamentally what these things are, and you can try to think of them as gas as much as you want. This is not the reality that we are today. Not in Ethereum, not in Bitcoin, not in any network.
Yeah, I think like one thing I do want to mention, like I don't think Ethereum is even close to like most used blockchain, and like I would want to have some data, but I think it goes Git and then a bunch of other protocols that kind of follow very similar. That first one? Use Git, used by millions of developers. So Git is actually it maintains a data structure which is pretty much a blockchain. It has like caching.
It doesn't have a canonical head.
Yeah. So so in general, like, and then if we go cryptocurrencies, right, we have Bitcoin.
Right. I just mean in the smart like in this space where you guys are playing. That's what I meant. Like obviously Bitcoin is But anyway, so keep going.
Well, I think it's important to remember how far we are from like actually used stuff. That's I think like I think Electric actually has a very good report which like they actually track down all the like developers building the space, and it's like laughable numbers, right? It's like 10,000 actual active developers in the like whole like smart contract space, right?
I just wanted to say I did an interview with Maria who wrote that report from Electric Capital. So, but anyway, keep going.
Yeah, I'm just saying like 10,000 developers was like, first few weeks of Google releasing the framework, right? That's kind of the that's kind of the difference of magnitude. So I think definitely understanding how can we bring more developers and like people and actually users, because definitely agrees that like if we have developers to come here, we need people to use this stuff, right? They need to have value. I need to see value. Why they will be using this.
So, Ilya, can I just ask you a little bit more about your approach with Near? Because so obviously you announced your new funding yesterday. Congratulations. And that's the news I was referring to. It was 21 million. And you also launched your proof of authority mainnet. And, I think you would agree with me, like proof of authority seems really appropriate for enterprise blockchain where, kind of the validators are known. There's a very limited number of them. And so I just wondered, like, is this your way of kind of targeting a different audience from the audience that like a more public blockchain like Ethereum is targeting?
No, I mean, the plan is to like start onboarding more and more validators pretty much like within the months. So we actually have 40 validators running right now on one of our testnets across the world, which, actually is more decentralized than some other public blockchains right now. But yeah, so the idea with POA is really just give the developers a platform to start deploying while we're still testing everything and kind of, in a way, pipeline the like still validating that, decentralization, everything works, like the networking issues, all the things. And like Zaki can tell how really hard these problems are and how long it takes to like debug all this. At the same time, already start providing a platform for developers to actually build applications. And like we have few developers kind of who already have an application and actually serving users right now from testnet. And we really wanted to give them platforms that actually like will maintain state going forward.
All right. Well, so to continue what I was asking about before, just about, whether or not you guys are thinking about how you're thinking about Ethereum kind of as you're, working on your protocols and figuring out which audiences you're targeting or which problems you want to solve or things like that. And I guess like in a way, Robert and Zaki, you guys, you're really working in a slightly different way where you're just trying to kind of bring a bunch of different types of, whether it's different blockchains or I guess for Robert with shards, like, how are you thinking about what you're doing, knowing that like Ethereum at the moment, at least in this particular space, is leading?
Well, as the others have said, like they're leading a developer community which is small relative to the amount of momentum that we want the space to gather in the future. And I would like to clarify that the concept of heterogeneous sharding is very, very fundamentally different from homogeneous sharding, because you're bringing in a capability of optimization and specialization that you cannot have with homogeneous sharding. But I mean, without a representative of Ethereum here, I don't feel too comfortable speaking a lot about Ethereum. So like maybe I'll speak a little bit more generally, like how we look at developer ecosystem and developer growth. I mean, this is one of the reasons that we've historically, and we continue to lead the charge into technologies such as Rust, like bringing Rust into the blockchain space and bringing WebAssembly into the blockchain space. That these, especially with WebAssembly, when you have the ability for developers to target WebAssembly, you're talking about a system of technologies where we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And you've got the strength of the millions-strong developer community, huge open source bodies behind it, all the browser vendors behind it for things like formal verification, good developer tools, and for people to write blockchain software in languages that they're familiar with. And I think this is key, right? That you don't have to learn an entirely new language, and rather you can maintain your comfort when moving into a new blockchain space as a software developer who hasn't previously been exposed to those things.
So I guess the way I mostly think about the blockchain space and what we're trying to do with Cosmos is, I guess the question. So where Ethereum has been successful is it has been an incredibly successful sandbox for building sort of early financial primitives and onboarding assets and engage and having some sort of baseline of economic activity on those assets. The question is really, is the like sort of the Ethereum maximalist strategy is the way I think about it is it's a point of view that's basically like, well, we can take these successful experiments, organically grow this ecosystem, sort of glue on scalability solutions as they're needed, and essentially sort of organically evolve into the sort of global sort of a global financial sort of ecosystem. I guess the sort of Cosmos point of view is that we're sort of missing some primitives there. And the primitive that we're missing is basically this sovereign interoperability primitive. And sort of not having that primitive means that that these sort of nascent experiments will never be able to grow into sort of large scale platforms. And we've had some early signs that there's general enthusiasm for this. We don't really sell the Cosmos platform really that hard, but we've seen sort of a number of other entities sort of either adopt the platform wholesale or basically adopt the philosophy and concepts of the platform in what they've built, and that sort of seems like the indication that we're sort of moving in the right direction by introducing this new primitive into the blockchain space, which is to a certain extent that's sort of like our governing philosophy.
I recognize, as you guys have all been saying, it's super early, and the number of developers that are working in the blockchain space is still very small globally. And yet at the same time, I think we could say about Ethereum that at least they do have sort of a network effect. And some of you did allude to this. Right now, obviously, DeFi on Ethereum, I would say, has a certain network effect at the moment. There's about $400 million worth of ETH locked in DeFi on Ethereum. So just in terms of attracting developers, if this theory that has been talked about for quite a while in the blockchain space is true, that cryptocurrencies and blockchain networks really are about building network effects, then how do you plan to attract developers to your ecosystems?
There's actually an interesting point that public blockchains, in comparison to something like Libra, is actually allowed to link to other blockchains, right? And that's what Zaki working with IBC, but there's various ways to connect, which means network effects actually, and bringing people into the ecosystem kind of benefits everyone. Obviously, we need tooling and we need kind of better connectivity. And that's, for example, we working on a bridge, which is somewhat similar design to IBC that links to Ethereum and allows you to build applications that just use the kind of existing liquidity, existing Lego pieces from Ethereum on other platforms. And I know Polkadot is doing the same. So in general, I think there is a network effect, and there's people who are kind of professionally building Solidity contracts now and are excited about the space. But I don't think at this point there's we see that Ethereum way of specifically building on this specific technology, right, is winning. And I agree with Arthur here. It's more about there's a community of people who are building this financial primitives and excited about the new way of building kind of fintech companies. And they will be looking for kind of what is the best pieces of technology that they can pull together to build a better experience for users, right? Even so what happened on March 12th, right? The kind of spike in gas price, spike in usage pretty much rendered a lot of applications unusable, or some of the developers end up paying huge amounts in fees, right? Because Ethereum just couldn't scale to this kind of very extreme capacity issue. So there's definitely a need for kind of different solutions. And I think even this existing cohort of people who are already here will be extending. And I think the other part is to just bring more people who are excited about fintech and see that kind of these approaches and these technologies actually will allow them to get faster to the market.
And Arthur, actually, does that apply to you, that you can kind of interoperate with Ethereum in some way to take advantage of the developer activity they have there? I see how it applies to some of the other blockchains, but I wasn't sure about Tezos.
I mean, Tezos doesn't have any way of, Tezos is what it is. So it's either attractive to developers or it's not. And the only means that I have to, I would say to make this attractive to people is going on podcasts and explaining why it's a great blockchain. So that's pretty much what I can do for it. But I do think it's very attractive. I think the spirit and the idea of it is that you can have a chain which is in some sense autonomous. It has internally mechanisms that can make it current over and over and over. And the idea of knowing that you can build on a platform and know that it's going to keep current, it's not just going to be displaced by something else, which is going to be faster or more scalable. It's always, the idea of having the means, technologically speaking, to always be at the forefront or close to the forefront is, I think, pretty compelling. But in general, I think that if you want developers, the best thing is to have good developer tools. That's what on top of a good platform you want to have easy to use, good developer tools, and that's probably the thing. But I would say also, if you're not an incumbent, and much of the network effect of Ethereum, I don't think it comes from the fact that they have existing. It's not so much that there's like what they've built. I think it mostly comes from the fact that they're an incumbent, and we're in a space which is mostly winner take all, and so incumbents have a huge advantage. So Bitcoin has a huge advantage over Ethereum because they are direct competitors, and Ethereum has a huge advantage over the other platform just because it was there earlier and it's been there for longer. And it has nothing. It has nothing to do with, I think, the network effect in terms of developers that they've built. It's more of a mind share type of network effects that I'm referring to. And I think the way that you can. The way that you can deal with that is by being very focused and by having a really good understanding of what it is that your technology do, what it is that you're building, and that lets you avoid a lot of dead ends if you understand if you really understand your product. And I think very few people in this space understand what it is that they're building. Like, they know how to build it, so they just don't understand what they're building.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just translating that as yours, sort of saying that basically everybody should have a vision and kind of keep that in mind while they're building. But I was curious to know, like, with Tezos, what are people voting on? I kind of took a look, and it looks like it's all stuff kind of really focused on the protocol, and it doesn't seem like there's anything controversial happening, but I didn't know, like, aside from that, like, what else are people doing with Tezos?
So there was actually something controversial in the Babylon upgrade, and even in Athens there were some discussions over the upgrade. So that, I think that's fairly important. And you also have to say that because there is mechanism, it's you should think of the voting mechanism on a chain not as a decision procedure, but as a ratification procedure. In some sense, you have some governance that essentially happens off chain, but then you present it and you ratify, and it basically basically I think it avoids a lot of the scenario which you might have otherwise, where people might push for controversial ideas through hard forks because they know that they're not going to get the votes, and so you don't necessarily observe it, but I think it has an important effect on the network. I think they're using it as cryptocurrency, and fundamentally, I think that if you're building a platform and you're not thinking, and you're thinking you're building a platform for application, and that you're not building a cryptocurrency, I think you're not understanding what you're building. If you don't think that Ethereum is a direct competitor of Bitcoin, I think you don't understand Ethereum. If you don't think it is, like whether it's or Atoms or anything like that, they are all direct competitors. And the fact that you can build application is great. If you can have applications, because cryptocurrencies are, they're good for a few things. They're interesting as they store, if the Cossacks come and try, and take everyone's money and chase everyone from a shelter, then you can keep your cryptocurrency, and that's great. That's use case number one. Use case number two, you want to make a lot of cross-border payment between machines all over the internet. It's completely infeasible to use one of the thousands of payment networks that exist out there. You want to use cryptocurrency? Great. If you want to pay fees for a smart contract, that's a great way to use a cryptocurrency. So being a smart contract platform lets you use your cryptocurrency in a useful way, but you're still building a cryptocurrency fundamentally. And if you're not thinking of it as a cryptocurrency, you don't understand your product.
In response to the challenging times, Crypto.com is introducing 3 measures to help the community. First, the 3.5% credit card fee for all crypto purchases will be waived for the next 3 months. Second, you could get up to 10% back by using the MCO Visa card on food delivery and grocery shopping at merchants like Uber Eats, McDonald's, Domino's Pizza, Walmart, and more. Don't have a card yet? Buy gift cards on the Crypto.com app from merchants like Whole Foods, Safeway, Burger King, Chipotle, Papa John's, Domino's, and more. And get 20% back on food and 10% back on groceries. This is a global offer, so check out which merchants are available in your country. Download the Crypto.com app today.
Today's episode is brought to you by Kraken. Kraken is the best exchange in the world for buying and selling digital assets. With all the recent exchange hacks and other troubles, you want to trade on an exchange you can trust. Kraken's focus on security is utterly amazing. Their liquidity is deep, and their fee structure is great, with no minimum or hidden fees. They even reward you for trading so you can make more trades for less. If you're a beginner, you will find an easy on-ramp from 5 fiat currencies. And if you're an advanced trader, you'll love their 5x margin and futures trading. To learn more, please go to kraken.com. That's KRAKEN.com.
The Stellar Network connects people to global currencies and assets. Stellar lets you make near-instant payments in any currency with anyone, anywhere. It's an open blockchain network that acts as payment rails for applications and institutions around the world, and designed so that existing financial systems can work together on a single platform. Transactions powered by Stellar are low-cost, transparent, and fast, saving both businesses and end users the time and money associated with traditional payment networks. With Stellar, your business can issue digital dollars or exchange existing fiat currencies without the need for complicated smart contracts or new programming languages. Its robust documentation, toolkits, and multi-language support let you quickly integrate Stellar into your existing products and services. Learn more about Stellar and start building today at unchained.stellar.org. Yeah, well, I'm just so curious, Zaki, Robert, and Ilya, do you agree that Bitcoin and Ethereum are direct competitors? Because I don't see it that way at all.
Well, what I think a lot about is, so like we have platform technologies and each of us have like different platform technologies, but it is somewhat like the search for comparative advantage for a token is also sort of somewhat like it's like a different social and technological progression to the like platform evolution. Like they're coupled because the token exists within the platform technology, but you have the search for comparative advantage. And comparative advantage is not zero sum, but like there is a relatively narrow space in which to search for that comparative advantage right now. And that does sort of render all of our tokens that like in something of a competitive space.
Well, it's competitive, but it's not zero sum, at least at the moment, because there's a lot of room for growth. So I think that's a very important distinction to make, is that like what one protocol gains is not necessarily the loss of another protocol. I mean, once you've saturated the market, yes, I think that this would be the case. But at this point, we're looking for differentiators that will just expose us to broader and broader markets and bring more people into the space.
I think good framework is that the like tokens and especially like monetary policy is in some way a central bank of this like country of, people and users and developers and everyone who's using this system, right? And like in some way, obviously, every country wants to take over the world. But at the same time, we actually have countries coexisting to some extent. And the central banks have a very different properties around like what is their economics is based on, right? Like, if you look at some of the, like Russia, for example, a lot of its economy is based on oil versus, I'm not going to talk about US. But like in general, right, the way the economics of the central banks operates can be very different. And while like at the same time, it is money and, it is what people use for like day-to-day operations. So I think like it's important to remember that like, yes, in like underlying way, kind of when I agree with Rob, when we like saturate the market, it will become like somewhat more of a competition. But at the same time, like the economics can be based on very different kind of components and like utility that it provides. I do want to mention though that like on the governance side, just to put one thought, I actually don't believe there will be contentious hard forks in proof of stake systems at all, because in proof of stake, like in proof of work, the decision of switching to a new protocol is like on miners, but everybody else needs to accept it, right? Like everybody else needs to also change the binary, like because miners can shift and keep and like start mining a different chain. But if I'm running my node, I can start mining the old chain, right? So there can be like natural forks and like mining power. In proof of stake, especially BFT, where we prefer liveness, you kind of need 66% to switch, or you need both to be like contentious hard forks, right? Like, you cannot keep the chain that like no changes chain anymore, because you don't have a super majority to produce blocks in the first place, even if like more than 33% left. So it's actually like, and the kind of somewhat bad part about this is actually, if there is something like this happens and both chains modify their state to produce new like forks, then the choice is actually not at people's hands, but at exchanges' hands, because the people who decide which one to value and which one has stake is like, whoever values it and whoever puts a price on it, which right now are exchanges and centralized exchanges for the most part. So there's a lot of like mechanics that we need to be aware of here.
I don't think that miners decide on forks in proof of work, because miners have to expend electricity in order to mine, and so they're going to follow markets, and markets are going to follow basically social consensus. So it's a bit of a circle where everyone is trying to pre-commit very hard to one branch of the fork, but it's hard to it's hard to make credible commitments where there's so much on the line. It's kind of a giant game of chicken between users, maybe exchanges, miners, and you get an outcome which basically you end up with groups having like massive leverage, just because it's just so entangled and you have this crazy game of chicken. And that's, I think, the beauty of having on-chain governance, is that you bypass this thing. I also think that even if you have BFT, like classical BFT for doing a consensus, you can still have contentious hard forks, because you will have validators who just decide to go on both branch, and they can't be slashed. It's easy to modify slightly the code in one branch to make sure they're not going to be slashed from one to the other. And so they'll just assign both. I think it depends on the mentality of the validators. If you have validators which are convinced that, yes, it's important to maintain the integrity of the network, it's fine. But if they are of the school of thoughts of, we're just building technology platforms, they're just applications, then, in other words, if they don't get it, then yeah, they're going to be on multiple platforms.
Yeah, I would just add to that if we just look at history with what happened with Ethereum Classic, there were some really small number of miners, maybe like one or two or something, that kept the old chain going originally. But Ethereum Classic didn't really exist until the exchanges started offering trading on it. So, it really was a situation where the exchanges actually led, and the exchanges themselves would say it was the users who led because they were demanding trading in it. So, just from that one example, I don't know if I would say miners were the ones who decided. But one thing I just wanted to ask was, I don't remember who it was that...
No, I just wanted to mention, like, when I said miners can, not that they are driving. But, like, in general, if there was no miners, right, there would not be Ethereum Classic. Like, somebody actually mined. In proof of stake, like, if I decide, to fork off a Tezos right now, like, it's not like I will not be able to, like, produce blocks, period. Like, or I will be producing blocks.
You'll have to tweak the state. You'll have to tweak the state, but you could if you just took the state enough.
And that is a contentious hard fork, and like that's a definition of contentious hard fork, tweaking the state. So like that's what I'm saying. There's no zero choice. There's always whatever's the super majority wants, or nothing. There's no like kind of splitting into like
but the
contentious like options.
And the problem, oftentimes, the problem is not that you have a fork and that there's, an Ethereum Classic or a Bitcoin Cash or something like that, because these are generally very small. The problem is that the one that becomes canonical for the wrong reasons. And so, the problem with the forks is that it's not that, you're going to have two branches, because one branch is almost always clearly going to be the canonical branch. The problem is the function that decides which branch is canonical.
Okay, yeah. Zaki, did you want to add on this? I mean, this is interesting.
Well, all I wanted to say is I think that like a big part of the design of, so Polkadot, Cosmos, and Tezos, at very least, are people who are like, have been designed by people who were like around for the blockchain wars of 2015, 2016, 2017. And so they are informed by like the political processes of that. And, Cosmos, a year into its life is just kind of starting to experience a world where we actually have like real politics on chain, and there are real protocol governance questions, and these things are, so we're like very early in the maturity process of that stuff. And so like our experience with these sort of like political systems are like our experience with the limitations of the technology platform and how that affected the politics informed these like design decisions, but they didn't, we are still yet to know how they play out. It isn't until you really stress the system and still there is like tension and contention and like disagreement that we really know any of this stuff and how our design decisions have played out. But that is where you kind of the rubber meets the road on these protocols is how they're going to process all of these political changes. And like how a polity and how like an actual community forms. So we're still like very early days in these things, but I think that would just generally be like, I think something that people kind of miss in the, like, this technology is better than that technology. We're trying to operate at this like intersection of like developer onboarding, community, and politics. On top of a technology platform. And it's only the combination of all of those things that eventually becomes like a significant player, not any individual aspect being better or worse.
Yeah, that's actually, I feel like maybe what Arthur was saying in the beginning, but I find it interesting because I do agree with you that it does seem like those tensions from those years have really informed the different design choices that you guys have made. But what's interesting, and I didn't realize this actually literally until we were here talking, meaning like before when we were figuring out who would be in the panel, I didn't think of this, but it does feel like, and Arthur, correct me if I'm wrong, it does feel like, and actually, I think even in this conversation, you've already had like a slightly different vision. Were you the one who said that this is like a winner take all space, and then the others were like, no, it's not? Was that you who said that, or who said that?
No, I did say that, but I agree with Robert that just because it's winner take all doesn't mean that now it's that is negative sum now. I don't think it's negative sum now because in the world of program, program says most startups don't compete against each other; they compete against anyone giving a shit. And clearly, blockchains today, they're not startups, but they compete for something. And right now, they compete against anyone's giving a shit and not really against each other. What I find very sad is that I think that the economic insight behind maximalism is correct, and some people use the correct economic insight as an excuse to not only be dicks on the internet, but like outright call for state violence, and I find that absolutely despicable. But the economic insight is correct. I think it's way down the line, and I just think it's better to maintain a collaborative environment, and see who makes it out alive, rather than try to tear each other to pieces like that early in the game. We tear each other to pieces in 10 years, okay, not now.
Well, but so I'm curious to know, like Robert, Zaki, and Ilya, so because you guys had this like slightly different vision that you guys were talking about, so do you agree with Arthur that someday down the line it will become winner take all, or do you just fundamentally foresee a totally different future where it's kind of like more this interoperable world that you guys are trying to build?
I think that's in many ways just the nature of things, that things follow power law distributions, and that when you start to run out of resources, competition is inherent. And you can see that in many different ways and places in the world. And I don't think that this is going to be any exception. But like the road that we have out before us is one that has a long way to go before I think we reach that point of exhausted researchers and fervent competition. At the end of the day, though, blockchain protocols need to provide value for the token in order to provide security. Like these things are built off of incentive loops where new issuance has to be based off of demand that drives security. So if there's no demand, or if there's more demand for another platform, then down the line, if there's a limited amount of possible demand, then you can't secure all of the platforms, or some of them may grow largely more powerful than others. But as Arthur says, I think that this is really why, I'd like to strike the point that things are not settled right now. Like the best directions to go in are unclear, and that it's really a time for experimentation. It's for projects to do something different from each other. It's one of the reasons that we also are using on-chain governance in our protocol, because we think that, sometimes the alternative seems to be, as we've seen from history, oftentimes just no governance, that nothing happens and you get caught in kind of obfuscated power structures and your systems don't adapt as they should. So a formalized system of government allows the system to adapt, bring in new technology, but it also allows people to just fundamentally put their money where their mouth is. And if they want to back a position with a certain amount of conviction, they can spend money and they can spend time in order to back that position. And well, whichever the community decides is the way that it's going to go.
So my general thought here is that I expect there to be fundamental trade-offs in like sort of what tokens can be good at. I think there are going to be like sort of politics and governance will imply that like not everything is for everyone. And so, if a token is sort of pursuing this like base layer monetary vision, it's likely to be like a sort of politicsless protocol and sort of optimized for that. I think all of us are definitely building systems that are more sort of specific, and will tend to end up with like unique characteristics. And so I'm more skeptical than in the blockchain space that you'll follow the sort of standard technology industry power law distribution because of sort of scalability constraints about communities and sort of standard practices and around like how your blockchain actually works. So more skeptical of anything truly achieving like sort of like a winner take all space.
And Ilya, you got cut off earlier. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I'm actually with Rob. I do think like it will follow power law, and like following my example with countries and central banks, like, we do have few superpowers that kind of controlling the world in many ways. And then there's, few other like sub kind of followers in a way. I do also like on the other side of this, like this space is evolving so fast, and like even in the last 2 years, like we learned a lot, kind of new things. There's new cryptography coming out. There's all kinds of things happening all the time. So it's both not the time, nor it's unclear that like what we think right now is the right way will be right way, in a few years, right? Like it may be, we all switch to zero knowledge proofs and we don't need a chain, right? We all just exchange zero knowledge proofs offline, or like P2P, right? Like there's like so many like possible other kind of alternatives. And I think like us exploring the space and like figuring out what works right now and how we like get it to people is important, but also like looking forward to new technologies is definitely something. And like it may reshape completely how we think like this will be evolving, right? I mean, same as like before Bitcoin, nobody could imagine this kind of thing. Like there's a possibility that there will be some new like kind of evolution that will completely change how we look at this. So we should be like open-minded about that. At the same time, like I'm agreeing, like we should be evolving, and yeah, like our plan is kind of continue both working as well as like continue evolving the protocol and like both feeding it closer to like what developers need, what users need, and like bringing in new technologies. So like I do think governance is very important. I don't think that token holder, like direct token holder voting is the best way to do it. And I don't think we have a good ways right now to kind of organize it. At the same time, like I do think in proof of stake right now, validators are kind of at power one way or another. Like they are the people who are running code and they are defining what blocks are produced. So like pretty much building from there and kind of evolving that into like operational governance is crucial. And I think, I mean, like I'm here in many ways following Zaki and with Cosmos and like what they've done already, just because like they kind of gave power to validators and like kind of delegators through the voting, and then pretty much like given they are who pretty much producing blocks and signing it and running hardware is like a reasonable way to start from. But I do think we need to bring more people who are actually like would be introducing other sides of this, like non-protocol developers, kind of community leaders, and in like other like financial institutions as well, to kind of manage how this is going forward.
Well, that's actually, that's kind of where I want to go next, or depending on the time, this is probably where we'll leave off. But basically, like, you know, if we're saying like it's so early in the space that we just need to get more people in, you know, how are you doing that? Like, you know, you guys did talk a little bit about the technological things that you think your technical features that will interest different developers and stuff. But like also there are the community aspects and everything. So like just in a holistic sense, like, you know, what are all the different things that you're thinking of doing to bring more people in and to get people to use your networks and to just get into cryptocurrency? And hopefully this is not one of those questions where nobody has a plan.
So I'll answer that by rebounding on what Zaki was saying. You know, Zaki was saying if you want to be something akin to money, it shouldn't be political. And I agree with that. But I also think that, you know, the protocols themselves should not be political. The best way not to be political is to basically have very strong norms against never changing anything, but then you give up on innovation. And so I think right now, if you look at these cryptocurrencies, they're not quite money, they're proto-money. And as such, they are political projects. It doesn't mean they have to be internally political, but you have to understand them as political projects. And I think embracing that is a way of growing communities, because you know, it's accepting the nature of the beast. But
how do you bring that message to people out? Like, how do you get people outside of crypto to take an interest in that? Like what you just said just seems very kind of internal, like not something where like what would be your message to somebody who's not in the crypto space to be like, hey, come check this out? So
my point of view on this is I think the next sort of interesting big steps for Cosmos is, you know, the Atom community is a very crypto native community. But I think that we have participants in the Cosmos ecosystem, whether you have like the Agoric folks who are, you know, very native to like the mainstream Java community. They've been part of the sort of JavaScript standards work in the mainstream distributed computing world for, you know, 30, 40 years. Is there a community that's going to be founded that's sort of more based in that world? You have people like Regen, who are sort of based in sort of like the environmentalism, sort of ecological transformation movement. In many ways, I think the way that you get mainstream people to care about blockchains and the way Cosmos helps onboard those people is the ability to sort of go and like land sort of social coordination mechanisms that are native to those communities and sort of and then bring them and connect them to some of the more crypto native communities inside of the Cosmos.
Yeah, I think it's actually, there's a trend that's happening in the real world, which is communities wanting to have more control and moving away, or like trying to kind of build that control outside of these big distribution platforms like Facebook, Reddit, etc., right? And like Hacker Noon is a good example, right? They moved away from Medium, so they have more control over their platform, over their users, over the monetization, etc. And this technology, like as part of it, provides kind of a substrate for some of this, like how to build a community, how to bootstrap it, how to align incentives and create new economies around this. So I think that's like an interesting perspective. The other one, which Vitalik mentioned yesterday, was around just like kind of controlled as a liability, right? We have these huge platforms that now pretty much becoming like they need to exercise control over and censorship over their own product and kind of sometimes censor even governments. And like for them, like something that actually decentralizes control and like in a way removes the need or brings it back to the communities, to the kind of more local governance, provides a new way of doing it, right? But like I think at the end, what we do need to do is like stop, talking about like how can everybody use blockchain. I do agree that like it's about money and politics in underlying way, but at the same time, like most people don't really care. Most people, like when they use an application, right, they don't think this is like a SQL application, right? Or like they just use application, like they don't care. So it's the same, like they don't think the dollar is, gold backed or not gold backed. They just want to use a dollar and buy something with it. And we need to get to that point where like people actually just use this for the function and kind of start operating on that level. And like I'm originally from Ukraine. Our economy sucks. We like every crisis that hit US hit like Ukraine 2-3 times more. And like I'm actually very scared of what's going to happen given what's happening with US right now. And like there's a huge opportunity for like this technology and especially money as like a way for people to shelter their savings and actually like hold up in the like economic turmoil. The problem is the current stuff is like completely unusable. Like no people can actually like get it on their phones or devices. There's no like markets created in the local countries, right? So we really need to like really up the game on usability and really up the game on actually like liquidity. Like if you think of like USDT, which is like in a way the only right now usable stablecoin. I mean, like, I love Maker, but like the amount of DAIs that exists in the world is like so small that like it's not like really operational. Like if we think of USDT, out like removing all the issues of like how it's managed, etc. Again, it's just like it doesn't have liquidity in the places where it needs to be, right? Like where people actually have demand for dollars and there's no dollars and there's no like way to acquire them. So I think like we kind of need to like start investing more in this types of things on top of like just making this stuff really usable for people.
So one other thing I wanted to ask about was, right now while we're speaking, we're kind of at the beginning of what will eventually be a multi-phase and quite long transition to Ethereum 2.0. And so even though we were just talking about kind of getting people outside the crypto space, and I'm sure, you do want to also get developers who are already developing in crypto interested in your projects. And so does that create some kind of opportunity for you? Like, how do you think the transition to Ethereum 2.0 will sort of shake up the existing kind of blockchain space?
Ask me again in 2016.
2016?
That's me. I remember in 2016 I was talking about Tezos and how it had proof of stake and I remember people saying like, well, who cares if Tezos has proof of stake? Ethereum is going to have proof of stake next quarter. So I think what it will be great. I think there's a lot of super interesting design in Ethereum 2.0. But I feel like Ethereum gets all the credit of Ethereum 2.0 with none of the deployment. So let's give credit to the blockchains which are out there, which are actually sharding, which are actually using proof of stake, which are actually, doing these things as opposed to talking about them.
Well, and just out of curiosity, like, would you say that most people that are interested in Tezos just are developers that didn't have previous experience in crypto, like didn't come from another blockchain, they just came straight to Tezos?
No, I think most people who took an interest in Tezos had an interest in cryptocurrencies to begin with. Although I think more people had an interest in Bitcoin and in Ethereum. I think in terms of the balance in the community, that's a difference.
Oh, interesting. And what about the rest of you guys? Like, how are you thinking about how that's going to affect the development of your protocols or interest in them?
So one, I guess, thing that I think a lot about with Ethereum 2.0 is Ethereum has sort of embarked on this strategy that is very much like, okay, we are going to sort of ground up design a second system. It is an interesting strategy because there's an alternative strategy, which is we're just going to try to colonize our network effects into other people's technology stacks. And that would, it's sort of, I guess, an interesting and alternative strategy, and it sort of remains open to Ethereum the option of pivoting. Like Ethereum could pivot and decide, there's like a lot of things that we like about the Near technology stack. It's close enough to the Ethereum 2.0 vision. Why don't we just colonize it and then try to bring our network effects over into that technology stack? We are all building open source technologies. There is nothing that stops any one of our technologies from sort of colonizing the ideas, ethos, code of each other. And I'm kind of surprised that this happens less than you think. So I think the way I think about Ethereum 2.0 is Ethereum 2.0 will be the attempt of the Ethereum community to move their network effects into a new system, to take that network effect with them into some new technology. I think the assumption that like Ethereum 2.0, that like how that happens is sort of like a fixed vision, may not end up actually being the case. And so it'll be interesting to see what occurs.
Okay, we probably have time for one more person who might want to jump in on that.
Yeah, it's a lot about like excitement in the space, and Ethereum 2 is like has this kind of ring to it. So I think like from our perspective, like we focus on developers, and bringing it to end users, like bringing their product to end users. So I in many ways like we cooperate or like have conversations with the Ethereum Foundation on like technology and underlying things. We share a lot of like indeed ideas like with Zaki and Polkadot folks, and like I think like on technology side, I think it's kind of in a way like shared mind space of us all figuring out what works, what doesn't, and how to make it. And I think like on network effects, I think it will be more utility and in some forms maybe the like governance and politics, but I think the kind of like utility and functionality and getting this to the users will be the like driving factor first. And like I think like all of us are focused on a different aspect of this and how this is brought to developers. Like we all kind of proving that this is the best way, or this is like at least a sizable chunk of the market, and we'll see how it'll play out.
Exactly. We'll know what works when it's all over. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you also to the audience, and I hope you all have a great day and stay safe and healthy, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. To learn more about Ilya Polasukin of Near Protocol, Zaki Manian of Cosmos, Robert Habermeyer of Polkadot, and Arthur Brightman of Tezos, be sure to check out the links in the show notes of your podcast player. Don't forget, take the Unchained survey at surveymonkey.com/r/unchained2020 to have your say in how we can improve the show. Again, you can have a chance to win a metal MCO Visa card that Crypto.com will stake indefinitely, and that offers free Spotify, free Netflix, and 3% back on all your spending. Plus, earn extra interest on your crypto deposit. For your chance to win, fill out the survey at surveymonkey.com/r/unchained2020. Unchained is produced by me, Laura Shin, with help from Fractal Recording, Anthony Yoon, Daniel Nuss, Josh Durham, and the team at CLK Transcription. Thanks for listening.